Helmet to the head. In my younger years, racing off-road motorcycles was my passion. My choice of events were called either enduro racing or hare scrambles. Enduro racing is an event where you race against time. A random starting number is drawn from a hat that establishes your starting time. 2 motorcycles start every minute until everybody has left the starting grid. The course is laid out as a combination of country roads and off-road woods. You follow markers posted on telephone poles and trees. The race is made harder by running rain or shine, crossing creeks and swamps and riding in deep sand up and down long hills. The distance for a local event was an average of about 125 miles. The first time you ever saw the trail was when you left the starting grid. You were not permitted to pre-ride the course. As you left the starting line, you started on a fixed time. The goal was to run as close to 24 miles an hour as you could. You were penalized 1 point for every minute you were late to each of 4 to 6 undisclosed checkpoints, and 2 points for every minute you were early. Seldom were you ever early. There was normally 1 control point where they counted seconds to break the ties. Sounds easy. Try it. Only the best of the best finish with a score of less than 10. Hare scrambles was more of a race against the other riders. All classes were lined up together in a long row. The riders shut off their engines, parked their bikes, and then walked back about 10 yards. When the shotgun was fired, you would run as fast as you could to your bike, start it, and head toward the first curve or small opening in the woods. The race was held on a closed course, normally around 3 to 5 miles long. Race time was a set period of 2 hours for a district event and 3 hours for a national or double points event. It was a little more intense than enduro, as the obstacles were closer and the long road sections were gone. Each time you made a lap, you went through a set of barrels, specifically set up for your class, and they punched a card each time you went through the barrels. The idea was to make as many laps as you could, and on the last lap they assigned a finishing number that determined your finishing position. Say you ran 10 laps and finished 5th, meant you finished in 5th place. On this day, you were at a hare scrambles in Galesburg. It was one of those days where it had downpoured rain all day. By the time the race started, it was just plain nasty. Normally, at a hare scrambles, you take 1 parade lap where everybody lines up in 1 long row and pre-ride the course for 1 lap. This lets you plan for places that might be a bottleneck, and you get to look for the easy way up hills and around obstacles. There was 1 narrow section where there was a log which was about 18 inches high or so, laying across the trail, with no way around. You had to cross the log, no matter what. On a dry day, this wasn't been much of a problem, but today, the ground was soaking wet. That meant that after every lap, the log would get wetter and wetter. The dirt just ahead of it would be eroded and slick, and there would be a lot of people having trouble crossing, a bottleneck for sure. Just as any other amateur event, there are some who take the race way too seriously. This day was no different. There was a guy who came to race and win, no doubt. At that time, I went to all the races and I had never seen him before and didn't know his name. He was just a beginner. He hadn't learned the lesson that riding under control is most times faster. He also had not learned that there is an etiquette in racing. Most of the racers are there to compete and have fun, nothing serious. You're competing for a cheap trophy and bragging rights. Serious, aggressive, win-at-all-cost racing just gets you or someone else hurt for no reason. This guy was about to learn some manners. The start had gone on uneventful, and everybody cleared the first obstacle without any accidents. Normally, the entire first lap is spent sorting out the field. The fast guys make their way toward the front, while the slower people drop to the back. It was a normal, yet unwritten rule, that if a man was faster, especially early in the race, and wanted to pass you, you just let him by. The faster racer would pull up behind you and yell. Then, when a safe opening came up, you would pull over enough to let them by. It was a win-win for both racers. It was on the first lap I encountered the new guy. Everything was tight and slippery as we were riding through the trails. When out of the blue, he came up behind me very fast and bumped me hard going into a corner. He knocked me off the track, and I fell in the mud. I thought to myself, what an asshole. I jumped back on my bike to continue, and the traffic finally stretched out. The fast guys were still at the front, and the slower ones were back in the pack. I saw him in front of me, and I was catching up on every corner. I watched him bump and slam people and bully those who weren't as fast. Something he didn't realize was that this was a 2-hour race, and the last 30 minutes can be a real killer. You're hot, dehydrated, and extremely tired. If you're not in good shape, you basically run out of gas. In addition, the reality would start to set in that you're not going to win. The best you can do is pick off your competition one by one and finish in the best position your body will let you. I was in good shape and knew he was tired. Eventually, I caught and finally passed him with about 30 minutes left in the race. I was ahead of him just prior to crossing the log across the trail. By that time, the ground around the log was like trying to get traction on an ice cube. The launch point was just ahead of the log was deep and muddy. The log itself was green wood and slick from being hit so many times, as well as being covered with mud from 1,000 passes coming off of everyone's muddy tires. The entire trail heading to the log was a long rut filled with mud and water. Normally, on a dry day, when you approach an obstacle like this, you focus on the place you need to cross and give your bike a quick blip on the throttle and raise your front tire and pop over the log. I had set up to cross the log when the guy ahead of me went over the log but stalled on the other side. This caused me to get stuck with my front tire on one side of the log and a rear tire on the other. I had to get off my bike and drag the bike over the log, which at that point in the race can tap every remaining amount of strength you have. I noticed out of the corner of my eye that to the left, just on the other side of the log, was a ditch about 6 foot deep. You could fall into it if you weren't careful. I was trying to keep my balance. About the time I was trying to pull the bike for the last time, this same jerk came up the trail and yelled at me for stopping him. Tired, and after almost pulling my guts out, I felt him slam into the rear of my bike and knock me down. Of course, I rolled down the ditch. He backed off and forced his way over the log using my bike as traction, and off he went out of sight. I'd rolled down the ditch unhurt, but found a small creek at the bottom. I was exhausted, covered in mud, weeds sticking me in the face and down in my neck. I was pissed. After laying there for a second, I got back up and climbed to the top of the ditch. I picked up my bike, which had been on its side and wouldn't start. Exhausted from trying to kickstart that machine, I realized it was flooded. I sat down to catch my breath and realized my day was over. Calculating the time left, it appeared there were about 2 laps left in the race. I was so mad at the guy that I decided I would go back to his truck after the race and raise hell with him. The entire field had passed me by now, and I helped a few get over the log when they had trouble. That's when I saw the guy who had just caused me my trouble coming back up the trail. He needed a lesson in racing etiquette. I picked up my helmet and grabbed the chin strap. At this point, there were no other people trying to cross the log, so he had pretty much free sailing to get there. Just about the time he got to the log, I swung my helmet and hit him in the face as hard as I could. He fell backwards as it peeled him off the bike, and of course he rolled down into the ditch. Looking down, I saw he was rolling around in the mud. He was yelling and cussing, and I was laughing. By this time, my bike would start, so I just jumped back on and rode away. Once back to the parking lot, I sat on the tailgate of my racing buddy's truck, waiting for him to finish. After my racing buddy made it to the truck, we had a couple of beers and relived the race. We sat and we laughed about the day, with my story being on top of the list. Thinking the guy would come back to the truck and to make trouble, I waited, but never saw him after we got back in the parking lot. Maybe he was still at the bottom of the ditch. In fact, after that day, I never saw him again at a race. The devil made me do it.